Welcome to the Itihas channel. Today we will talk about the sons of Dhritarashtra, Pandu's brother Dhritarashtra, the blind king. We shall first invoke the gods to bless us. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana Namo, Om Anjaneyaya Namaha, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Guruve Namaha. So we spoke about Pandu and his children, Kunti, Madri, their mothers, in the Shatashringa, a beautiful meadow nestled in the Himalaya mountains. Pandu went there because he knew he couldn't have a relationship with his wives, and he knew that such a man would not be able to rule with respect. So he gave away everything and went with his wives to the Shatashringa mountains. In the main Kuru family, in the kingdom of Hastinapur, the city of the elephants, there ruled his brother, the blind king Dhritarashtra. I shall talk about how the albino Pandu and the blind king Dhritarashtra and the third brother, the knowledgeable Vidura, were born a little later. But right now, we talk about Dhritarashtra, the Kuru king who ruled Hastinapur with the help of his uncle Bhishma. So the blind king Dhritarashtra ruled the kingdom of Hastinapur with his uncle Bhishma. Before Pandu had set out to the Shatashringa mountains, Pandu was the one who ruled the kingdom of Hastinapur in his brother's name, Dhritarashtra being the elder brother. The king was still Dhritarashtra, but he was king only in name. Pandu ruled the kingdom. He was the Senapati, the commander of the forces. Under Pandu, he extended the borders of the kingdom of Hastinapur to encompass most of Bharatvarsha before he finally went to the mountains. And after he went, Dhritarashtra remained in Hastinapur ruling the kingdom. Dhritarashtra knew he was the elder of the two, but everybody regarded Pandu as the king because Dhritarashtra was blind. And Dhritarashtra knew that he had to have children before Pandu had children, for only then would his children rule after him. He loved Pandu immensely. They were inseparable through the years growing up, because Pandu, with all his patience and his love for his elder brother, was his elder brother's eyes. He would hold his elder brother on his back and on his shoulders and take him round all through the meadows and the countries, and they would play with Pandu holding Dhritarashtra on his shoulders. Dhritarashtra was no mean man. He had the strength of 1,000 elephants. He had extremely powerful arms and a beautifully sculpted body. The only problem was he couldn't see. He was blind from birth. He had married Gandhari from the kingdom of Gandhar, probably somewhere near Kandahar nowadays, probably. And he had married Gandhari, who then, in reverence to her husband's blindness, covered her eyes for the rest of her life and decided to be blind herself. Extremely great sacrifice, which gave her a lot of ascetic powers. And so Dhritarashtra and Gandhari decided that they should have a child before Pandu bore a child. Well, there wasn't much competition because they knew Pandu couldn't bear a child. So they were not that excited or that hasty about it. But eventually, Dhritarashtra decided that it was time, and Gandhari was made pregnant, and Gandhari was with child. And Gandhari was overjoyed. Around this time, the great Vyasa, Krishna Dvaipayana, came to Hastinapur. Fate brought him there, and Gandhari was in charge of taking care of sage Vyasa, Veda Vyasa. And she did an excellent job of it. You might notice that it's always the women who are sent to take care of the sages, because the women don't make mistakes in hospitality. Men do all the time. Men make mistakes in hospitality, talk their mind out, which they shouldn't, and enrage the sage here and there. But Gandhari took care of the sage with so much love that in that moment of exuberance, Veda Vyasa blessed Gandhari that she would have 100 powerful sons. And the moment this boon came out of his mouth, a fear gripped his heart at the mistake he had committed. A terror gripped him like he could feel like he had done some great abomination of a great crime. But seeing the pleasure in Gandhari's eyes, he was mollified and he felt maybe it was not all that bad. But there was something that was rankling him right through. And it so happened that it was around that time that Gandhari was pregnant. And then saying this, giving this blessing, Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyasa walked back into the Himalayas, not being able to understand what brought him to Hastinapur, what made him give Gandhari such a blessing of having 100 powerful children, and knowing that he had set something in motion which he could not take back at that point of time. He went back into the Himalayas and started meditating. And through his meditations, he was able to see far, far ahead as to what he had set rolling into motion. Back in Hastinapur, Gandhari started advancing in her pregnancy, and Dhritarashtra was overjoyed. He had a year-long celebrations organized in Hastinapur, awaiting the birth of his children. And Hastinapur was lit up in excitement and great fun. It was a great time in Hastinapur, those 9 months when Gandhari was pregnant. When it came to be known that Gandhari was pregnant, Dhritarashtra did not spare any cost in ensuring that there were festivities all over. And 9 months passed, and Gandhari didn't deliver. And Dhritarashtra was worried. Dhritarashtra was nervous. The 10th month came, and news came from the forest that Pandu and Kunti had given birth to Yudhishthira, who was a Devaputra from Dharma. This completely angered Dhritarashtra. He got so angry with Gandhari for not having borne him a child in 10 months that in his anger he went with another lady of the palace and had intercourse with her. This lady also became pregnant on the 10th month of Gandhari's pregnancy. And hearing this and knowing that Pandu had a child, Gandhari started screaming in agony and pain and terror. Gandhari started realizing that all these 9 months, that burden which was in her tummy was not something that was beautiful, because through these 9 months of her pregnancy, she had bad dreams and nightmares all along. She had a lot of difficulty. She had a lot of physical difficulty and psychological difficulties. And she realized something was wrong. And in that anger, she started beating her tummy. She started hitting herself against the wall and trying to force that child out from her stomach, because she didn't want that child in her womb. And she wanted it to be born at the earliest. And she kept on hitting her stomach with such great force that finally something came out. And she gasped when she saw it. And the midwives and the other ladies of the palace gasped when they saw it. It was a huge black mass, slithering, quivering, pulsating. Putrid odor emanated from it. A bad, purulent fluid emanated from every part of it, and an extremely horrible stench filled the air. Seeing this dirty, black, putrid mass, Gandhari fainted. The other women also fainted, only to be woken up to the sense of reality that something's not right. In her anger, Gandhari told the maidservant to wrap this ugly mass of flesh in a piece of cloth and take it to the outskirts of the city and throw it somewhere in the ditch. And as this maid was controlling her every intention to throw up, and she walked to the outskirts of the palace to throw that piece of mass, Veda Vyasa, Krishna Dvaipana, suddenly came back to the palace. He had divined that something is not right. He had been in an intense state of confusion and anger and absolute distress for the last 9 to 10 months. And he came back to Hastinapur. And as this maidservant was walking out, he asked her, "What is this you carry in your arms?" And the maidservant told him the story of how Gandhari gave birth to a black mass. And he yanked her hand and said, "Do not move an inch. Come with me. Come right away. Take me to the cellar." And immediately he was taken to the underground cellar of Hastinapur. As he was entering the palace, Gandhari came out and started screaming at him, "Oh, Rishi, you promised me 100 great children, and look at what I have delivered, a black, ugly mass. What is this? What is this you have promised, and what is the blessing you have given?" And Veda Vyasa looked at her with anger, bordering on about to give a curse, and just controlled himself and said, "Woman, never has my word gone in vain. Never has what I have said not happened. And in this case too, what I have said shall happen. Come to the cellar. Arrange for a huge room with 100 pots. Fill the 100 pots with warm oil and ghee." And he brought with him some herbs, which he crushed and crumbled and put into each of those pots. As he sprinkled those herbs into those pots, the oil and the ghee is clarified butter, the oil and the ghee started bubbling up, and a strange sound filled the cellar. Then he asked for cold water and kept pouring cold water on that mass of flesh, lest it start to putrefy. And then he started doing something absolutely phenomenal. Gandhari and the maidservant stood at the door of the cellar. Gandhari could hear what he's doing with her enhanced sense of hearing, and the maid was recounting what Veda Vyasa was doing. Veda Vyasa kept pouring the cold water onto the piece of flesh, and then with his bare hands started plucking out thumb-sized pieces of this flesh and breaking it away. The first piece was the biggest. He took it and put it in one of the pots that was there. And then subsequently he went on picking out thumb-sized pieces of this flesh, 100 in number, and putting it into each one of these huge pots. And towards the end, Gandhari started thinking, if I could only have a daughter also with these 100 sons. And the great Rishi could hear this voice in her mind. And he divined that she wanted a daughter too. And of the last piece, he took a small piece out and made it 101 pieces and said, "Get me another pot with the oil and the ghee." And he put those herbs in that he had brought. And he put that last piece in and he told Gandhari, "You wanted a daughter, you waited for her, you were hoping for a daughter. You shall have a daughter too. You shall have 100 sons and a daughter." The words of Veda Vyasa will never go in vain. The words of Veda Vyasa will never be proven wrong in the history of this humanity, in the history of Bharatvarsha, and it will happen. And then with great care, he used some materials to cover these earthen pots. He then kept some areas in different, he kept a few herbs in different corners of this room, which allowed a certain amount of heat to be emanated from it, so that a particular temperature was maintained in this room. This was one of the first instances where incubation was described. The method of probably in vitro fertilization or some form of in vitro delivery. A form, a history, a science that has been lost over the ages. Maybe someday we will get that science back, but this was the first time when a rishi, a scientist of those days, would take the flesh with the genetic material, put it into pots, earthen pots filled with some form of oil, ghee, and herbs. Cover it intently. Keep herbs all over the room to maintain a certain fragrance and to maintain a certain temperature. And then he ordered that the cellar be closed and sealed shut and not be opened for another 9 months. And as he came out of the cellar, That same dread came into his heart that came the last time he blessed Gandhari. But he knew that he had to do it because he had blessed her and the boon was given, and he had to make the boon come true, or the repercussions would be on him. And he went back into the mountains and prayed for the success for the benefit of Bharatvarsha. He knew that something bad is going to happen. He knew something evil is going to happen. And thus in that sealed cellar lay 101 earthen pots, sealed with that genetic material, with that piece of that flesh from Gandhari's womb, kept into each of those 101 pots. And there in those 101 pots, something was happening. 9 months started to pass. Around the time of Bhimasena's birth in the Satashringa mountains, around the same time, some very ghastly happenings started taking place in the city of Hastinapur. The city of the elephants started seeing strange omens. Bats started coming from the surrounding wilderness in hordes. Jackals, panthers, animals of the night, owls coming in huge drones. I can't remember what the pack of owls is called. So owls started coming in huge drones into the city. Vultures started coming in. The braying of jackals, the braying of various animals of the night. The birds of the night started swooping in. Crows started cawing all over. And it was said in those days, rain started falling with blood and black tar in it. And spontaneous fire started erupting from the earth. The earth started cracking and trembling. Earthquakes started coming up and the earth started cracking at various points. And lava and fire spewed from these cracks. And there was damage to a huge number of houses. People died in those fires that started coming right in the middle of the houses. And in all these omens, the rishis started fearing the worst. And suddenly there was an unearthly glow coming from the cellars of Hastinapur, where these 100 earthen vats were kept. And suddenly there was a huge sound, a resounding clap, like something happened. Gandhari and her maidservants, Dhritarashtra and his brother Vidura, ran down into the cellar and broke open the door. And what came to their eyes made that maidservant faint. Gandhari, of course, couldn't see like her husband, but Vidura had a sick feeling in his stomach. And he knew the ill omens that he was hearing outside heralded the birth of this child. He saw the biggest child born when one of the vats was broken, and a child lay on the side, an evil-looking child with unblinking serpent-like eyes, with a dirty grin on its face, bathed in a fluorescent, luminescent slime, lying sprawled on the floor, uneasily looking, and then that child gave a absolutely horrendous cry. A cry that was a mixture of all those animals of the night and the birds of the night. The braying, the screeching, the crying, the absolutely horrible cries that all the animals gave. That child gave a cry that was a culmination of all those cries. It was almost like the Lord of the devils had come and been born. And these creatures of the night came to see their master and to pay their respect to the master. It was an eerie night in Hastinapur. People trembled in fear. There was absolute fear all over the city, and the skies were red. It was raining blood in some places. It was raining black tar in some places. And one by one, with huge retort-like sounds, the vats started breaking open, and the luminous slime started flowing out, and the child, one by one, started falling out of these vats. The biggest, of course, was the firstborn. As the other children started coming out of these vats, this firstborn child started sitting up and making a weird attempt at sitting up, and then started playing with itself. playing with its groin and a very wicked smile on his face. Seeing this, Vidura knew that this was the devil himself who was born in Hastinapur that day. Gandhari, blind as she was, also was deaf that day. She didn't hear a single sound that happened. She didn't hear a single of these omens. All she could hear was the cry of that eldest child, which was a screech which was as horrendous as every animal of the night put together. And all she would hear was the beautiful cry of this eldest child. She immediately asked her maidservants to bring the daughter and this eldest child to her. Trying to control their fear and their horror, these maidservants brought these two children to her, and she immediately set to feeding them. And she was in bliss, oblivious to the entire world, just happy breastfeeding her two children, the daughter and the eldest son. Dhritarashtra, on the other hand, started becoming faint. He couldn't hold himself up. Vidura, his younger brother, next to him also started becoming faint. Together they helped themselves away from the cellar and went into the main room of the king. There the blind king, blind as he was, started getting visions in front of his blind eyes, visions of the disaster that was happening all around Hastinapur that night. And in his fear he asked Vidura, his brother, the most knowledgeable of men of that land. He was said to be an amsha of Dharma himself. Dharma Deva is said to have been reborn as Vidura. Of course, the concept of avatars and amshas I will explain to you a little later. But Vidura is said to be an amsha of Dharma Deva himself. And Dharma Deva told Dhritarashtra, your eldest child is the child that brings bad omens, O king. Your eldest child is a child that will bring decimation to the Kuru house, O king. Your eldest child is a child that will destroy the soul of this land, O king. What do you aim to do? And Dhritarashtra said, what do you want me to do? He is my eldest child. He may be king one day. He will rule this land one day. What did you expect me to do? And Vidura said, O great king, it would be good to kill that child. And Dhritarashtra would have none of it. He got shocked. He couldn't believe that Vidura was speaking such words. He said, what do you mean? And Vidura said, you still have 99 more boys and another girl. Kill this oldest child, my king. And all the other 99 will be sublime children who will grow up well, who will grow up taking care of y'all, who will grow up nicely and probably be great rulers of this land. But kill that one child with those ill omens, my king. And Dhritarashtra is having none of it. And Vidura started speaking from Dharma. He said an individual can be sacrificed for the greatness of the family, for the life of the family. A family can be sacrificed for the sake of a village. An entire village can be sacrificed for the sake of a country. And the entire country can be sacrificed for the safety of the immortal soul. O great king, sacrifice that one child and the soul of this country will be saved. The soul of Bharata Varsha will be saved. Those 99 children will grow up beautifully, will grow up nicely and take care of this land, will rule this land in all honor. But kill that one child, O king. He will bring down this house. He will bring down this country. He will be the death of hundreds of thousands. Please, O king, listen to me and kill that one child. And Dhritarashtra would not have any of it. He could not think of killing his one child, his eldest child, his favorite child. He just said, no, that child will grow up. He shall be called Suyodhana, later known as Duryodhana. He shall be called Duryodhana. Duryodhana will be a great warrior. He will be my favorite child and he will rule this land. He is born as the eldest child. I will discount the elder child of Pandu. My son Duryodhana will rule this land. I shall not kill him, Vidura. I am having none of it. And he sent Vidura away. And Vidura walked away in despair, knowing that the end of this great land was coming near, and there was nothing he could do about it. And thus were born the 100 sons and the daughter of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. And they say Gandhari was pregnant for 2 years, 1 year in her stomach and 1 year in the cellar. And in these 2 years, in an unnatural birth, in a birth that shall be remembered for the ages, the great Veda Vyasa assisting in that absolutely different birth were born the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, who later called themselves the Kauravas, taking the name of the Kuru dynasty with them, hoping that when they take the name of the Kuru dynasty, they would get the legitimacy as being the true rulers of this land. And these 100 children grew up to be evil right through, led by their elder brother Duryodhana. The younger brothers followed him wherever he went. And every act of sin that this elder brother told the younger brothers to commit, they dutifully committed. And the blind king and his blind wife could only see that this eldest son was the greatest and the most beautiful and the most handsome and the most strong and the most wonderful of all the children of the land. And such was the birth of the great Dhritarashtra's children. 100 Kauravas were born that day. That night of the omens, the same night that Bhimasena was born in the Shatashringa mountains. It was Veda Vyasa who went back into the Himalayas, who could see the entire future that lay out ahead. He could see that these 100 children would be the epitome of adharma. They would be the epitome of all evil that would finally cause the ultimate war of the Mahabharata, the ultimate war between dharma and adharma, where a god would come down to this earth to lead the forces of dharma against adharma, would lead the forces of the righteousness against evil, to wipe out evil from this earth, and evil that was burdening Mother Earth and cursing Mother Earth and tiring Mother Earth to an extent that Mother Earth couldn't bear it anymore. And hence, Narayana himself, an Amsha of Narayana himself, was born on earth as Krishna. And he took the side of the Pandavas, children of Pandu, against the Kauravas, the children of Dhritarashtra, to fight the holy war, to fight the Dharma Yuddha, to get good and dharma back into this Bharatavarsha. And with this, we take the name of our gods. Om Bhadrakale Namaha, Om Anjaneyaya Namaha, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Gurube Namaha.